So we'll get started. Welcome everyone to a very important conversation, the Biostatistics Town Hall on how do we pursue impact as biostatisticians. And we have two outstanding guests and also our students talking about this issue. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about how this originated. Actually, this originated very organically. I was speaking, as you know, that our graduate student GEO Association was actually on strike for a couple of weeks. Is that right, Ben? And and
Yes.
and yeah, and then their demands and their angst and their internal questions really led to a lot of deep exploration of the issues that we are facing as a community, as a university, as a society. And after the strike was over, when I sat down with Ben, it seemed like the strike is over, but the issues and the questions and the discussions still remain very much at our mind. And how to engage with our society as statisticians and quantitative data scientists, how to make impact. And there is a really strong desire in our students to give back to the community and look for opportunities when you can really usher change in society. So with that, I think that we started discussing what would be some of the ideal role models who have done this successfully in an academic setup, and we thought about, of course, Jeff and Luke. But before that, our students have already started this movement for a long time. We have an organization. Statistics in the community, which is now currently actually Mike Elliott started this, but Tom Braun and Kathy Spino have been leading this for the past year with several student leaders. So we wanted to showcase a little bit of their work to begin with, and then we'll go to Jeff and Luke to talk about their work in context of this whole discussion. And two graduate students, Alicia Dominguez and Ben Brennan, have agreed to moderate this whole session and really steer the conversation. We shared a questionnaire for pre-submission, and many of you submitted very thoughtful, deep, provocative questions that we are going to talk about with Jeff and Luke today. And I am going to keep quiet and hand it over to the students now. But before that, I think the first presentation is going to be from STATCOM, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Steve Salerno, who has been a true champion of statistical engagement, statistical practice, making an impact, who is going to share some of the work that our students have been doing before we embark on this conversation with Jeff and Luke. Thank you so much, Steve.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Steve.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk here sort of in the department town hall. I realize that a lot of our sort of programming efforts in the department sort of centralize around the beginnings of the semester. So I thought it was nice to be able to sort of give an update of what we've been up to as an organization and who we are and what we do to those in the department who may not be as in tune with what we do. So I just have a couple slides prepared, and I'll hopefully have some time for questions, and certainly leave plenty of time for our two guest speakers today. But I just have a little bit here. So Statistics in the Community is actually, it's a graduate student group that is sponsored by the Department of Biostatistics. We actually have over 10 departments where our students come from. And really, this is a volunteer community outreach initiative where we're essentially, instead of volunteering in the traditional sense, volunteering our time and our expertise as statisticians to community groups, non-for-profits, and government organizations who could benefit from our services and who might not otherwise have the resources or the time to do statistical analysis or to understand their data. And so while it's directed by graduate students here in the department, we've been really fortunate now to have over 10 departments sort of contributing their efforts as well from many different fields, quantitative and not, and sort of having us come together under this goal of providing a service back to the community. So it's growing into quite a large operation, and so STATCOM has been around at Michigan since 2006, but every year we seem to be getting larger. So I'm really just a mouthpiece today for a very large group of students and a group of student leaders as well who have been really carrying a lot of the weight of this group. And so Emily Morris and I have been co-presidents for the past 2 years. Emily Roberts has also been on the student leadership team for a while now. Ben, who will be moderating the talks today, and Edmund as well. And we have now 3 faculty who sort of oversee and advise a lot of the projects and a lot of sort of the other initiatives we have going on. And that's Kathy Spino, Tom Braun, and now Matt Z as well. Has just joined us as a 3rd faculty to help continue to expand our efforts. I know the sort of theme of today is impact, and so I won't sort of talk anymore about the administration of STATCOM and just get right into what we're doing. So I just sort of made this figure today so it's as up to date as possible. And this is just sort of where we're at, where our projects come from. And I think sort of the STATCOM model is that it's a small range, it's sort of very local, but very large impact. And that's really what we try to do. We're sort of statistics in the community, and quite literally giving back to our community. So Ann Arbor, Detroit, Lansing, Flint, sort of these around Southeast Michigan and starting to expand out a little bit, is where we centralize a lot of our work. And I know there's sort of Data Kind and these other large organizations that have very global efforts, but I really think sort of what makes STATCOM unique and special is that we're operating in a very small area, but we have very tangible, very high impact results from some of our work. And I know this slide is a bit of an eye chart. These are just some projects that we've worked on just over the past couple of years. And just to show sort of the diversity in the work that we do, from basic sciences to education, sort of civil engagement, sort of basic human rights, food insecurities. There's sort of a wide range of projects that we work on, all with local community partners, in order to sort of give back to our community. I'd like to have a couple of slides here with just some very recent projects that we're working on, just to comment a bit about on our impact. And so this was one that we finished recently. Edmund Woolridge and Amy Singer, who just graduated, actually finished this project up over the summer. And essentially, STATCOM does a lot of work with services for the aging, and this sort of ranges the gamut from meal delivery, medication delivery, and small things like lawn maintenance and sort of housing uptake for those aging in place, all the way to like adult daycare and medical services. And so we worked with this local area agency on aging office, because what we didn't know was that a lot of the budget that comes from this, there's state money that comes from this. There's also a lot of private money that gets donated. But what sets Washtenaw County apart, where Ann Arbor is located, is that we're the only county in the state of Michigan that doesn't see a portion of our property taxes go towards services for the aging. Everywhere else in Michigan has sort of a defined proportion of property taxes that go towards these services. And so the question becomes, why is this not happening? As we know, Ann Arbor is a very wealthy area, and there's certainly high property taxes. And so what we did was a sort of comprehensive cost projection and utilization analysis where we looked into the next 5 years based on historic data, sort of what the uptake and utilization is going to be, what the increased costs are going to be, and how much money is needed to sustain these programs, all sort of with the goal of putting the senior millage on a ballot next election in order to be able to vote in this additional source of revenue for these services. And so that just wrapped up a few months ago. This was tabled for the ballot this November due to sort of everything else going on. But I'm really hopeful that this will make it on the ballot next year. Another current project that Ben has really been taking the lead on and that I've been a part of is with the city of Flint and the county and Genesee County, where sort of Flint resides. They have this participatory research project. It's a 2-year sort of, it's been cross-sectional. They're now developing a longitudinal cohort, but community survey that looks at all various like neighborhood and individual health, perceptions of health, sort of in and around the city of Flint and in the greater Genesee County area. And of course, recently with the Flint water crisis, they've been supplementing the survey instrument with a lot of questions about sort of perceptions of health and the impact that the water crisis has had on the community in Flint. And so they actually reached out to us in order to deliver the survey back to the public, being able to put together a comprehensive report of the survey findings, sort of being able to help them with their survey instrument moving forward in future years, and then also analyzing these data to get an understanding of the perceived effect of the Flint water crisis even today, as it's still going on and sort of it's very still pervasive in the Flint community. And I could talk about this one all day. This is one of the ones I'm working closely with, but I know Ben and his team have been now working on a Shiny app where we can actually sort of democratize this data back to the community, so that in real time people can look at these results, sort of analyze, even if it's just basic sort of stratified proportions, these very basic survey results. So the people who are contributing to the survey can now have a sense of ownership over the survey as well. So I'm really excited to see this project moving forward. I think perhaps on a lighter note, a project that we just started last week. So thank you to all who signed up for this project. And this is actually working with Matt Z. His father is a vet and working on these data, looking at health outcomes associated with spaying and neutering in cats and dogs. And so sort of this organization wants to study these outcomes and see if there are non-surgical alternatives to spaying and neutering that have better health outcomes in the long run. So public health for humans, pets alike. It's just, we sort of run the gamut on what we try to do. And this is a very different project for us, but a cool one nonetheless. We just actually released this project yesterday and I already see that we have a ton of people sign up to volunteer, which is great. I mean, it seems to always be the problem that we have more people interested than we have spots to fill. But I'm hoping this project will turn into maybe several projects down the line. So as some of you may know, there's sort of a housing affordability crisis in Washtenaw County. Property is very expensive. These sort of large apartments are going up all over the place, and it becomes very impractical for some people to live in Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County due to these rising housing costs, due to traffic and sort of the relocation that's happening due to both the school's influence and other things going on. And so we're working with the Ginsburg Center, which is sort of the point of contact for all community partnerships between the university and the community, to come up with this comprehensive narrative-based report on the housing affordability crisis. And so we'll be doing analyses looking at publicly available data, privately available data that the Ginsburg Center has been sourcing, sort of blending this in with some narratives and some stories that they're collecting in order to build this comprehensive report of housing affordability, like in and around Ann Arbor. So we're still, the call for volunteers is still open. I know people are signing up and we're really excited, and we hope that if this is something that's interesting to you, to please sign up for this as well. And as I mentioned, we sort of always have more interest than we have reasonable space to fill. So I won't go into these in too much detail, but we have 4 potential community partners and potentially 6 projects coming up that we're hoping to start next semester, looking at sort of telehealth and interventional outcomes sort of in the wake of COVID as people have been transitioning to telehealth. How are their health outcomes changing now that they've moved to this virtual format versus in person, looking at efficacy for some of their new interventions, and as well as some projects such as one with the police department that we're hoping to onboard as well. All sort of in the sense of community impact, as is the theme for today. I know I don't want to take too much time, but STATCOM recently has been really pushing a lot past these project-based consulting jobs and thinking of new and creative ways that we can sort of bring the community together, have additional impact. And so one thing that our students have done is we've developed a series of workshops on R, statistical computing, and sort of reproducible research in sort of a high level summary that we've been giving to students in the School of Social Work, students in the School of Education, and sort of some of the other student groups that are doing research-based work in the community. We also host our annual Data for Public Good Symposium, and I'm going to put a shameless plug in for that. The call for abstracts is going out next week. I highly encourage you to apply. It's a couple of weeks before ENAR. We did that on purpose. If you have a cool data example, if you have a unique methodology that's sort of benefiting the either public health or public good, this is a very low pressure way to engage and get feedback and sort of share what you're doing. And those call for abstracts will go out next week. We've also been trying to present more. We had a really, really fantastic panel at JSM. Jeff Leek was one of our speakers, which was incredible to be able to see some of the national impact that's happening. And as I mentioned, we're really sort of localized to Southeast Michigan. So one of the things that we've been really trying to do lately is help charter new STATCOM chapters elsewhere. And I'm really happy to say that through our collaboration, we now are charting a STATCOM chapter at Columbia Biostatistics and also sort of reinvigorating the STATCOM chapter that's at NC State Statistics as well. And I think in terms of impact, we've seen a lot of really great media recognition. We certainly have a ton of support from our department, from the university, from the community. And I think that really speaks to sort of the good that can come out of partnering with the community and sort of thinking of these new and creative ways of volunteering our time and expertise in a way that would otherwise sort of be foregone. So again, I really appreciate the department, all the department support, even things like this, being able to have the chance to talk for a few minutes about sort of what we've been up to and what we've been doing. And so if you want to get involved, if you're not currently involved with STATCOM, we start projects on a rolling basis. We tend to do 10 to 12 projects a year. We're looking to have potentially one more starting soon and another 4 to 5 at some point next semester. We'll be offering events like the symposium that people can contribute to. If you're interested in joining our leadership team, we would love to have you. And sort of if you're not engaged with STATCOM and would like to be, I would say definitely email us. We'll get you on our mailing list, and then you'll be up to date with everything that we're doing sort of in real time as we're doing it. I know I just totally raced through all of that. I hope I have a couple minutes. If people have questions, want to hear about some of the things we're working on in more detail, or some of the other things that we've been up to. But I appreciate the time to be able to at least give a few updates on where we're at and where we're going.
Thanks, Steve. And this is outstanding for all the work that you're doing. So in the interest of time, maybe we'll have all the conversation at the end after we hear the whole perspective of Jeff and Luke. So Alicia, take it away.
Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Professor Jeffrey Leek. And before I introduce him, we'll have a link for you guys to submit questions to. So I'll put that in the chat later, but like from our side, we'll be taking questions at the end of this in the sake of time. So so Professor Leek is a professor of biostatistics and oncology at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. His research focuses on public health genomics, data science as a science, and research on scientific literature. In addition to research, he is also co-creator of the Johns Hopkins Data Science Specialization on Coursera, which has enrolled over 4 million students. In his spare time, he writes a blog at Simply Statistics with professors like Robert Peng and Raphael Irizarry, and is a co-editor of the journal Biostatistics. Last year, Professor Leek, if you remember, described some of his efforts to expand access to data science jobs to individuals from underserved populations in East Baltimore through combining data science technologies, educational data, and collaborations with local nonprofits. Today, he'll catch us up with some of those efforts, and he'll talk to us about how we as statisticians can amplify our voices to work together and contribute to societal issues that we're facing within and outside the community. So with no further ado, I'll hand over the theoretical mic to Professor Leek.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction. I have to say, I'm thrilled to be able to come and talk to you today. I'm a huge fan of everything that your department is doing in this regard. The STATCOM group I've heard about a couple of times, and I desperately hope we end up getting something like that at Hopkins. I hope you'll export that to us. And I'm a really huge fan of all the work you've been doing. I know Brummer and many others on COVID modeling in India, which is sort of, I think, an incredible contribution to society. So I feel like it's a real honor to just be a part of this conversation. So thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. There was a mention that I might be kind of quiet. I can be heard? Okay, cool. I'm going to share a screen. I know that I just presented about this program, so I'm going to not go into a huge amount of details. I'm just going to remind you of the sort of core thesis and then talk a little bit about how we're starting to think about expanding ourselves. And so, and then sort of chat with you, hopefully, about that idea more at the end. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Hopefully that will work. Share. Okay, can you see my screen? Somebody shout, because I can't see you anymore.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So this was the title for my talk. So it hasn't changed, the title, since the last time I talked to you. And I think you remember that there was a whole bunch of people that helped me with this. So anything you like is probably due to somebody on this screen. Anything that's a little bit silly or not good, that's probably my fault. And so the hypothesis under which we started a few years ago on this program is that talent is equally distributed, that's a universal constant, that there's talented people everywhere. And so these represent some people that like grew up and live in the neighborhood right around Johns Hopkins hospitals. This is Andre, Anthony, Yarmaine, and Antonio. They are incredibly talented young people who are now all trained data scientists through our program. This is one of our cohorts that we've run through this data science training program that we have. But the opportunity is not always as equally distributed as the talent. And so this is remember, I think you probably remember from my talk when I came, I talked about the economic opportunity atlas. So this is the amount of money that you'll make in your mid 30s if your parents were low income. And so you can see that a lot of communities have relatively, so red means you probably won't make very much money if your parents didn't make much money. And so there's a real lack of economic mobility, particularly in the Southeast, some parts of the Midwest, and where I am in the Mid-Atlantic. And so if you zoom in a little bit closer, like if you look at the neighborhood, I used to say where I work, I haven't been to the building in, 6 months. So I don't know, do I still work there or not? I don't know. But this neighborhood right around where Johns Hopkins Hospital is, the median income for individuals, actually it's for families at the age mid-30s, is $18,000 a year. So if you think about that's adjacent to a massive multi-billion-dollar institution, it's sort of stunning that there would be that kind of lack of opportunity in this kind of neighborhood. Of course, this happens in Ann Arbor too. It happens in Michigan as well. Ann Arbor is maybe not as much. So you can see there's a lot of blue on this map. So even if your parents are relatively low income, there's quite a bit of opportunity for you, but there's still some red and orange on this map. And certainly if you go to places like Detroit, you will see the same sort of map that you see in a place like Baltimore, where if your parents don't make very much money, it's really hard for you to jump up into that next sort of level of income above what your parents maybe made. And so, as you probably remember from my talk last time, we developed a multi-pronged approach to try to tackle this problem. So the first thing that we did was we built an online set of massive online open courses, MOOCs, that are free for anybody, called Cloud-Based Data Science. That training program is currently being used by thousands of people all over the world. It primarily ends up getting used by people who have already been educated and already have access to education. So what we did was we layered on top of it a program we call CBDS Plus, Cloud-Based Data Science Plus. That includes in-person tutoring 3 hours a week from people from our group. We pay the people to complete the courses. We give them access to a Slack channel. We give them free computers, cheap computers that they can use to complete the program, and then we help them look for jobs. And then this is listed as one row here, but it really should be about 7,000 rows. We partnered with this organization, HEBCAC and YO. We've now also reached out to other organizations like Heart Smiles in Baltimore, and they help us identify young people who would be interested in a data science program and have the aptitude for it, and then provide a huge amount of wraparound services. So a lot of the folks we work with are financially or housing insecure or have other sorts of issues that come up in their life, and really would prevent them from completing our technical program. And by partnering with these nonprofits, we've been able to sort of support the whole person, not just the person that's learning R in their spare time. So with this sort of program, we've been able to run people through and sort of knock down the key barriers. So the nonprofits we work with, the primary job outcomes for most of the people that work with those nonprofits are jobs like service industry, fast food type jobs, security guard type jobs, things like that, Amazon worker, warehouse worker. And so we've sort of worked on ways to make sure that we get them educated about what data science is, provide them with funding and computers, access to computers, access to us through these online tutoring office hours. We've created a company that hires them for their first job, though I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. And then access to connections to other jobs at other employers. And so we're trying to sort of build out this pipeline that can help move people from communities where there isn't much opportunity to jobs where there is a lot of opportunity. And again, the sort of whole hypothesis here is that they're extremely talented individuals that just don't have access to those opportunities. So we've been running this in Baltimore for the last couple of years at Johns Hopkins in sort of a pilot mode. Starting in a couple of days here, we're going to launch the second site. So Mount Sinai School of Medicine is about to launch the same Cloud-Based Data Science Plus program for a cohort with a nonprofit there. And then Columbia University and Moffitt Cancer Center are sort of scheduled to come online sometime in 2021 as the next sites for the Cloud-Based Data Science program. And so we created this set of resources, clouddatascience.org/for-educators. That's new since the last time I came out to talk to y'all. That basically bundles this whole system up and gives it away so that anybody else can run it if they want to run it in their home institutions. And so part of that is like figuring out what are the pieces you really need to be successful with this program. And so we found that there are sort of 4 things. One is you need a university who can provide supportive and really like thoughtful tutors and support and engagement on Slack, sort of to teach. You need a nonprofit partner who can identify potential scholars, provide those support wraparound services, and really support whole people as they go through this process into a really new field. And then a critical piece that we did really poorly, and I have been telling everyone to do it better than we did, which is first get in place a hiring organization that will understand what it means to hire a non-traditional data scientist for like an entry-level data cleaning and data management role. What does that mean? What should they be able to do? What should their qualifications look like? And have those sort of in place, those employment opportunities in place before you get started. And then a relatively modest amount of funding. So we've been telling people you kind of need to support the tutors. You can make it volunteer tutoring. And obviously there's a huge amount of enthusiasm with StatCom and everything, and I think that would be great, but also I think having sort of support for tutor salaries makes it a little bit easier. And then we pay participants $2,500 for them to complete the program. It's sort of like part-time salary, part-time job for them to complete the program. And then we provide them with a laptop. We use Chromebooks, but sort of you can get lots of inexpensive, decent computers for around $500 a pop. And so that people can do this online. So we've been really thinking about how do we bundle this up? How do we export it? How do we sort of make sure that we support people who are doing this? And one of the things that we're working on actively right now, I wish I could say that it's live, but it's hopefully going to be live in the next couple of months, is something we're calling Data Trail. And so the idea is basically it's a journey that people take together in data science. And so it's this partnership between colleges and universities, for-profit companies, and nonprofit community partners. And the idea here is it's going to be sort of an online Slack channel that brings together people who are learning about data science from these cloud-based programs. They can get data science training, financial support, and social support. And on the other side, we're bringing in mentors, senior data scientists from industry who can come in and get the appropriate training, anti-racism training, mentorship training, and then learn about HR best practices to try to create employment opportunities for people that are new to the field. And so we're going to be launching this, and it's going to support all the different sites around the country through sort of a centralized community online. And so we're really excited about that. And we just hired Davon, who's one of our graduates from the CDDS program, to start setting this up. And so it's hopefully going to launch in the next month or 2. So you're actually some of the very first people to even hear about this outside of grant funders and things like that. So with that, I will stop there, and obviously happy to answer questions. And it was great to have a chance to tell you a little bit about the updates of what we've been up to.
Yeah, thanks so much for that talk, Dr. Leek. It's really inspiring, I think, for a lot of us to see the type of work that's being done in our field to help out communities, and gives us a lot to think about. We have some really cool questions submitted for you, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on to Dr. Shaefer, and then we'll ask those questions afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Luke Shaefer, who is the Herman and Amali Cohn Professor of Social Justice and Social Policy and the Associate Dean for Research and Policy Engagement at the Ford School. He's also Professor of Social Work and the inaugural director of, I think what he'll be talking about today, is Poverty Solutions, which is an interdisciplinary presidential initiative that partners with communities and policymakers to find new ways to prevent and alleviate policy. So without further ado, Dr. Shaefer, go ahead and take it over.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. I personally really enjoyed getting to hear both of those presentations. StatCom seems really cool and very much in line with the type of work we're trying to do at Poverty Solutions. And I've known about Jeff's work for a while and really admired it and admired the way he thinks about it and in the execution. So Poverty Solutions is a university-wide initiative. We get our charge from President Schlissel, and the goal is to sort of move beyond basic research to partner with communities and policymakers to find new ways to prevent and alleviate poverty. So it's really the goal to sort of get outside of basic research and to think about what can be done about it. But we try to really take a systems level approach. So a lot of work sort of in the social welfare field. By the way, I think there's a tree being shredded right behind me. I have my dog on my lap. My son is freaking out because he can't find his iPad. So there may be a little background noise, and we're all used to that now, but my apologies. So there's a lot of like problematizing the individual in work around poverty, saying if we could only fix the people, then things would be better. And we really try to take a systems level approach to say that poverty is often the outcome of a set of systems that don't work like they should. Sometimes they're well-meaning systems, maybe sometimes they're exploitative, but if we can intervene at the systems level, we can improve outcomes not just for one person, but for a whole suite of people, right? And sometimes that means piloting and building, right? To something that could be massive, like Jeff is doing. Sometimes it means sort of identifying a policy structure, right? Or a system that's really failing people and trying to intervene in that way. So we have a little bit of a theoretical model that I'm going to show you. I only have a handful of slides here. Let me see if I can get these up for you. This is sort of the way that we start. So we, a lot of times, I think poverty-based sort of researchers like to come in with sort of the question that they have in mind, and their idea of the community engagement is to convince people that that's an important question, that that's the thing that they should focus on. And in our case, we really say, we try to think that from the positionality of a faculty member, even someone who studies poverty, right, that's all I read, our positionality sometimes mean that we miss important pieces of the puzzle. In fact, a lot of times we don't even know the right questions to ask. So we really try to promote listening for community input, right, and having, when we want to do this work, to have it really driven by our community partners. And listening, I think, means just simply asking, hey, what are the issues on your minds? Sometimes it means going to meetings and trying to listen underneath, right? Because people don't always sort of know. If you were to say, what should you focus on? They'll have a set of things. But if you're able to go to meetings, right, and be a part of longer term conversations, you might see that certain issues pop up. And you might say, hey, that's something that we could study, something we could understand a bit better. And then, of course, we think that the sort of the biggest value add, right? Poverty Solutions is really interdisciplinary, but you all in particular, is the ability to analyze data and conduct research, right? So we can bring a set of tools that often communities don't have access to, and bring them to bear. And when we say share findings, right, we mean trying to really share findings in a way that are accessible to a broad set of people, right? So how do we, at least in my field and a lot of social sciences, usually our idea of dissemination is that we write a research report and maybe at some point we do a press release at the max, right? So how do we front load that and really think about communications as a key piece of what we're doing? And with the first presentation I saw, I think a lot of you are thinking really well ahead on this relative to others. And then using that research to really figure out what are the levers that could change, right, that would matter a lot for people. So supporting implementation, making sure a change actually happens in the world because of the work that you did, right? Because of the combined efforts of your community partners and you. And then evaluating over the long time to see if what was done actually mattered. So I wanted to just give a couple of short examples that I thought might be of interest to you all. So one of our key programs is the Partnership on Economic Mobility with the Mayor of Detroit. So I have a number of staff members who work in City Hall, including Joshua Edmonds is the digital inclusion director for the city of Detroit. It's actually working on reducing the digital divide. So he technically works for me, but he's full-time in the mayor's office because we in the mayor's team both recognize that sort of closing that gap is a critical issue. And Josh actually just did a short video for Quicken Loans and the actor who played Aquaman in the latest blockbuster video, and I think they're up to 1 million views. So it makes all the rest of the dissemination we've done seem sort of like small potatoes. So if you can get a movie star, that's good. Anyways, so we have a set of people. We have somebody who just wrote the homelessness encampment policy for the city of Detroit, who's embedded in the housing department. We have somebody who's working on labor market attachment. for young adults. But when we really sort of thought about all of the things that we would expect to matter for economic mobility in the nation's now second poorest large city. We were the first for a decade, and the latest numbers before COVID suggest we're now the second poorest large city. One thing that was really not on my mind was auto insurance. Auto insurance wouldn't have even been in sort of the top 50, right? But as we started talking and talking to residents, going to community groups, talking to policymakers, we heard about it over and over again. Of course, there wasn't any sort of official source for auto insurance rates, but we got really interested in this and we're able to find one of these sort of private services called the Zebra that does sort of auto insurance estimates based on your zip code and your characteristics. So we could sort of take through sort of the same customer across the entire nation to find out that the same policy that costs something like $1,400 annually was costing $5,400 in the city of Detroit. So that's 18% of the median income at that time in the city of Detroit, which is just ridiculous, right? It's not rational for us to expect people to spend 18% of their annual income on auto insurance, especially when, you know, the same policy that's $5,400 in Detroit is $1,200 in Cleveland. That's a pretty big competitive disadvantage. And it got even more interesting when you start to look under the hood for this policy, right? So, so to speak. So it turns out Michigan has this, what was a very well-intentioned sort of policy around unlimited support for folks who have health conditions related to an auto accident. And no other state does that in the country. And that was important for understanding, so we could have some really big bills and that drives up everybody's auto insurance rates. But then there were a couple of even more important details that were less known. One was that when an auto insurance pays a hospital bill, for instance, they're required to pay 100% of that bill, versus health insurance is actually required, you know, usually they have a negotiated rate that might be 60% of what they're charged, 50%. And so this actually created like a perverse incentive for a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, right? A lot of the actors to want the auto insurance to pay that bill because the health, you know, the hospital would get more. So we took sort of these data, which nobody had sort of ever looked at in this way, and then just did a map. It seems like people just go crazy for maps. They love maps. It's a great way. People really like to see sort of where their community is. So this map was just a map based on a metric from the United States Treasury saying if you spend more than 2% of your income in a year on auto insurance, it's considered unaffordable. So we took these estimates from the Zebra and charted them across the entire state and saw there's only a handful of dark blue zip codes where auto insurance was affordable. And then of course, Detroit and Flint have the highest rates. And that's because we allow for the use of things like credit scores. So in Michigan, you have a higher auto insurance rate if you have a perfect driving record but bad credit than if you have great credit and a DUI. So, you know, there's a lot of debates about sort of the actuarial soundness of this, right? The companies say, we know what we're doing, we know it's a better predictor, but there's a question about fairness, right? Should we say that somebody should be forced to pay the most expensive auto insurance in the country when they have a perfect driving record and for something that has nothing to do with what they're asking for insurance? So this is important for another reason. We've gotten really interested in the labor market. This is one of the things where we sort of first encountered Jeff's work and just really interested in sort of workforce training programs that actually work. But we also got interested in the jobs that were available. And it turns out we know a lot less about that, right? So we know we can track usually surveys of workers, of people. But, you know, we don't have really an accounting of jobs. So, but there are these sort of clearinghouses, right? So we were actually able to access data from the state clearinghouse on available jobs in the area and use a scraping program to see like what were the qualifications, what were being required of people who applied for them. So we weren't, again, just problematizing the people. We did a paper on sort of barriers to work that people face, be it disabilities, low education. But what about those jobs? And no, I skipped through a couple slides. But this was one of those. So we, from, you know, I think it's something like 6,000 to 9,000 different job postings in the Detroit area. And you can see sort of all of these things that are requirements of the jobs that would weed out a lot of potential people who want jobs. So one is requires 1 or more year of work experience. We have a lot of people who have been out of the labor market for that long. More education, those seem obvious. Occupational licensure, that's a really interesting one, right? So 17% of the jobs requiring high school or less education in Detroit require some sort of occupational licensure. Well, we know that those can be really difficult to get, right? They often, there's a fee. There's a licensing exam you have to sit for. You have to pay for that. Maybe you have to get there. It might be pretty far away, so there could be transportation issues. And then there's training, which may cost money too. So the key question with that is like, does it really need that occupational licensure, right? That's the key sort of conceptual question. And sometimes you want to have those occupational licensures to protect everyone, but sometimes maybe it's just sort of over-credentialing. So that's something that we should take a look at. Requires computer knowledge, right? That is a big one that a lot of you, that you all might be able to be a part of. Criminal background checks, again, the question is, you know, that actually ended up being a smaller issue than we would have thought. We heard a lot about that, but it's a smaller proportion. But if you look down, I'll just note, 20% of the jobs for low educated workers require, 18% require auto insurance, require the highest in the nation auto insurance, right? And then 20% require driver's licenses. Well, it turns out years ago when the state of Michigan didn't have enough revenue, they looked for ways to raise revenue besides raising taxes. And they thought, you know what, we're just gonna raise the cost of all of our tickets. And then if somebody doesn't pay their parking ticket, or somebody doesn't pay their, more likely, you know, having an out tail light, right, that type of ticket, then we're going to impose another ticket. And then if they don't pay that, we're going to suspend their driver's licenses. So we've actually suspended driver's licenses for about 300,000 Michiganders in the state. And then we know from research that when we suspend somebody's driver's license, they're likely to lose a job if they have one to begin with, right? So this is just sort of one example, I think, of a set of interlinked systems that we might never imagine are related to poverty or inequality in very serious ways, right? And so this paper, the auto insurance paper that I showed you, that was a part of debates that led to a change in Michigan last summer that started to take into effect this summer. So it sort of spurred sort of a new way of thinking about the issue that people hadn't sort of done before. They hadn't thought of it as an issue about poverty, right? And it sort of helped sort of move that along. And now the key is we're sort of starting the work of trying to figure out if it actually worked. So trying to attack systems, so often going in directions that you might never have imagined. I never thought, you know, I'd be a part of analyses about auto insurance, and then trying to change systems so they work better for people.
Great, thanks so much for that, Dr. Shaefer. It's really interesting just to think about the different ways that we might not think about a problem, but that it actually is a problem. So yeah, so again, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to some of the submitted questions. And Alicia is going to share her screen on these. We have a slideshow on them, and she did share in the chat a Google Slides link that you can submit questions to. We will ask the questions on the submitted slides unless there's a question on the Google Slides link that gets 10 upvotes, in which case we'll immediately go to that question, because that's obviously would be a pressing one for everyone in attendance. Yeah, we just kind of want to emphasize too that these are really great questions, and I don't think any of them have a right answer or wrong answer, and we just really want to help facilitate discussion in the department about these type of questions. So go ahead, Alicia.
Okay, So you guys can all see my questions, right? So the first question's for Jeff, and they were interested in what kind of support did you receive from your department or school to help you get your initiative started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the biggest form of support was sort of moral support at the beginning, that they were willing to let me do something that's not very traditional biostatistics. I think you have a great department for supporting that sort of thing too. We initially started with a little bit of funds that we had from the Coursera courses, and then used that investment to sort of bootstrap the first versions of this. Since then, we've had, you know, a bunch of investment from various different, from the university, but also from like funders who are largely philanthropic funders to help support the program. I did want to mention before I move on too much that, Luke, I really wish I had read your paper on employment barriers before we had started. I think we ran into every single row on your list there. So that's my homework after we get done here, is go to read your paper. But yeah, so we got a little bit of modest support to start, then we kind of demonstrated it was sort of working, and then we sort of have bootstrapped more and more support since then. But it can be done relatively inexpensively. Was one of the goals, was what we tried to create a program that wasn't super expensive to run. So.
Thank you. This question's
Yeah,
also for you.
Yeah, the next question is also for you. What were some of the challenges associated with starting your own company, and how do you think this has affected you achieving your goals?
Yeah, so all the challenges. I don't know anything about running a company. So I started a company with, I sort of suckered a friend of mine into doing this with me. And we sort of started it. And the two biggest challenges, one, especially with COVID, is like lack of time. Like it's sort of, I already had a full-time job. So having a second full-time job was a little bit bonkers. The second thing that is the real challenge for that company, and I think for this program in general, is the mismatch sometimes between, that company does data science work for a variety of big companies, and those companies have extremely strict deadlines and big demands. And then we have a new workforce that's like brand new to the field, brand new to these kind of problems, brand new to this kind of work. And so sometimes there's a mismatch in terms of the demands on brand new people. And so we've been sort of talking to investors now about the company to get more senior level staff to sort of buffer frankly, the junior people are thrown into like one of the hardest jobs I could imagine in data science, where they're like basically brand new, they have no experience, they have like a few managers, and they're like dealing with like big name companies that like demand things. So it's a real challenge to do the company that way. I did everything backwards. I would not recommend you do it the way I did it. But big mistakes all around, including not reading Luke's paper. So, it's just like a consistent set of mistakes that I've made along the way, but it's sort of starting to stabilize now.
Jeff proves that mistakes are okay, right? I often say, if you haven't made some mistakes, you haven't really done anything, or probably nothing worthwhile. So sometimes just doing it, even though you might not feel like you have any idea, is worthwhile.
Yeah, and then this next one's actually for you, Luke. What role does statistics play in the process of writing and implementing policy? And I'll add on a personal question to the end of this. If it's a large role, how do you suggest that we as statisticians get involved in this type of thing, and what's the best way to do that?
I might add to that a strategic question, Jed, that if STATCOM wanted to partner with you, or have projects, so what would be some processes for that?
Yeah, great question. So I was already thinking of that when I saw the StatCom presentation, and I think I would welcome, probably suggest a sort of meeting between our leadership of our.
Oh no.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
Luke's having technical difficulties, so we'll come back to this question for him, and we'll just go on to the next question. So let's see. So this question's more general for junior faculty. So how can you balance the need to get regular research work done and the desire to have clear societal impact? So Jeff, do you think you would like to
I'm
take a
happy
jab
to
at this?
bring it back. You have, you have a department chair there that could probably answer this question too, as well, or better than I can. I would say that the thing that I did was I sort of got somewhat pre-approved by my department chair that I was going to spend some of my time on this, and then we kind of made a plan for how we were going to document. This was around Coursera courses mostly at the time, rather than sort of this new training program which I launched after I was already kind of a full professor. But I think you can document alternative sort of successes, academic successes, but that really relies on your department chair and your A&P committee to be sort of mindful of alternative sort of strategies to getting promoted. And so that it largely relies on supportive senior people that can like help you navigate those. And I was very fortunate at Hopkins to have senior leadership that were kind of recognized that if I didn't do this, I would have to leave because I'd want to go do it somewhere else. And they were like, okay, well, we'll make it work. And so I think you have more power to do that than you think, but it makes sense to talk to your leadership and get it organized and planned out in advance so you know where you're going, and both for you and them to have confidence. But I would, again, defer to your senior leadership before buying my advice.
No, I think that I feel that you have to pursue. Yes, you will have like support from, but even if there was resistance, and in my life, I have faced this when I was a junior faculty, at the end of the day, you have only yourself to talk to. And if you're not happy with that self, with the eyes that you're looking at, then nothing else matters. So you cannot lose your profession and your vocation for a job. Job you can find, but you have to have your dream and profession and vocation. So I always tell junior faculty and that pursue what you really feel very committed to and you believe in, and it could be in very different domains. And I think our field also has come a long way to really value impact in multiple domains when you write a tenure dossier. So I think that you have to believe in and pursue your dream, and we are there to help you, support you, and cheer you. And this is good work, and we have to do good work and good science. So maybe we should go back to Luke's question.
Sorry, I was unceremoniously, I think my internet kicked me off. So I was just going to say, sometimes very simple things actually matter. And I think the two key insights for me are like, can you help people with statistics, help people understand a problem or an issue in a way that they haven't before, right? So I think that's like what the auto insurance thing did. That's what the paper on job postings did. We have a set of things and we're gonna do something, and it has to be understandable to people. So I think you can do stuff underneath it, but really trying to figure out, how do I use statistics to communicate with people? And then a second thing is like, how can I use statistics to tell people something that they didn't know, right? And so I do a lot of that at the state level. Now we're able to sort of use program data to say, the department would know things like, we've seen a big decline in people getting cash assistance. And they will say, we think it's because we have these time limits, right? And we should get rid of the time limits. And so we're able to go into the data and say things like, oh, it looks like almost nobody has actually come up against the time limit. But a lot of people are being sanctioned, right? Because they're not fulfilling this requirement or fulfilling that requirement. So that's what you have to change, right? I advised a program that was supposed to be, the sort of mission of the program was to help unemployed individuals sort of get meaningful jobs. And so we did sort of, actually a random sample from the intake forms. The only information we had on the people who came into the program was actually on paper copies, right, that were filled out. And so we took a random sample of the intake forms, and we're able to see that actually 60% of the people coming into the program, they were employed when they came in already. They were underemployed. They wanted better jobs. And so I think the organization had to sort of grapple with the fact of like, okay, all right, maybe we're helping people who have jobs get better jobs, right? So it really sort of fundamentally changed how they thought about the program. And there's just a lot of opportunities like that, right? We've helped the city of Detroit revamp its home repair program, where we sort of did a similar sort of random sample of paper applications, I think. And we're able to say, actually, you're not serving the people that you think you're serving in the aggregate. So, and that sort of insight can really, when you are able to tell people something about a program they didn't know, it can often prompt action.
Thank you. We kind of have a question related to that later. So I'm kind of glad that you already started touching on that. So let me go back to the next. We have a couple more submitted questions, like 3 or 4, and then we have a few questions. We'll try to get to those. But yeah, Ben, you can ask this question.
Yeah. So this is kind of the part of the discussion where right or wrong answers kind of go out the window, and we just want to emphasize that this is about discussion, not about giving the right or the wrong answer. And so this question was, is taking a neutral approach or stance in statistics or our research still appropriate given the time?
I have to jump off in 2 minutes for my 3 o'clock call, so I'll just offer a quick thought on this one, and then say how much I appreciate being a part of the discussion. So I actually think values should play a role. It should play a role in the questions that we ask. Sort of, I think some of what we approach, right, on a lot of levels, like questions come down to values, but I think we also have to be absolutely able to sort of let the data and let the analysis drive our interpretation of what's going on. So we, for example, got really interested in police brutality, right, this summer, and we've been supporting some work on that. Actually, one of our grants is from a really interesting scholar at ISR who's taking body cam footage and looking at interactions of police with people of color versus white folks. So he's doing a statistical analysis of that. But one of the things that we got really interested in early on is diversifying the police force a good way to tackle this? And we started to look in the research, and it actually looks like as you diversify a police force, actually police brutality doesn't abate at all. In fact, it might actually get worse until the police force is made up of like 40% people of color, right? And that surprised me. But then when you think about it a little bit, you think about folks who are sort of on the sort of outside of a group, sort of coming into a system, often have to sort of show that they're even more sort of invested in the system than the majority group. And so that's the impact. Now, actually, women, diversifying the police force with more women may actually have an effect of reducing violence. And we think that might be because men sort of want to perform in a different way. Again, this is all in the aggregate for women, right? These are sort of complicated things to talk about, but that's a mission for you, right? Is that you have to go in and not assume that you know what the right answer is. You can let your values drive what questions you ask and how you think you should approach them, but be ready to sort of listen to wherever the evidence takes you in terms of trying to get the outcomes we want to achieve.
Thank you so much for that answer. That was great.
All right, really nice to meet you all. I hope to be in touch. Great to see you, Jeff, and thanks everyone for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Luke.
Seeing you, Luke. I can hang out for a couple more minutes. I don't know what the plan is here, but I've got.
Great. Yeah, I think that it was 1 to 2, and we still have about 4 or 5 submitted questions. So me and Alicia had chatted and said we're okay to stick around and moderate this for sure for as long as it goes on. So we do understand if anyone has to go, but we think there are some cool questions that are still to be asked and discussed. So if you do stick around, that's super cool, and thank you. So if anyone, yes.
Yeah. So the next question is, are we as statisticians enforcing systemic biases by controlling for things like race in models and dichotomizing gender? If so, how do we address this or be mindful of these issues in our own research and in the way we teach statistics? So I know like the DEI committee has done some great work in this and had some seminars, but I don't know if you have any perspective to share with us.
Is that question for me? I would say I agree that those are issues that it's interesting. I have been trained and have modeled data and used those variables as control variables and a number of analyses I've done over my career. I think I've never thought about them as much as I have over the last couple of years. And I do think there's probably a lot built into that I was not paying enough attention to. Whether I would be the one to have the right answers to that is probably not the case, but I do think it's, the things we standardize on make a difference, and we should think about what those things are. I've been thinking also for our work a lot about, we condition on socioeconomic status a lot, and all of our work is predicated on the idea that you don't have to condition on socioeconomic status and you can still generate opportunity. And so I definitely think, what other big blind spots do I have when I've been analyzing data? But I'd be interested in hearing what more expert people than me have to say about that, as I'm sure there are on this call.
Yeah, and we do want to emphasize that all these questions aren't just for Dr. Leek or anything. So if anyone has input or things like that, just feel free to unmute yourself and go for it.
I do not know if anybody on the call want to comment on this. Any other faculty members?
I'll make a quick comment. I think in the language of causal inference, the issue of race, there's several things. One is that, sort of trying to distinguish whether this is a confounder or a mediator. Like, are you trying to use this to explain an effect, or are you sort of trying to adjust it away? And, so those are different things. There's also the issue that sometimes you can't really, even if you're thinking about it as adjusting, the differences between, say, Black and white Americans with respect to income and wealth are so extreme that it's sort of issues of positivity in the causal inference world. There's just not enough overlap there to make those kinds of differences. So, I think there's that's just a couple little quick points. And I guess another point is, what are you thinking? Are you thinking about this as like a biological issue, or is it really more of a social issue, right? So those kinds of things are I think, important.
Thank you, guys. We'll move on to the next question. So this question is, how can we as statisticians best get feedback and input from the communities that we want to make an impact on doing research on, especially if we are not from those communities ourselves? Because this is kind of one of my questions. Like, I know in other public health programs, there's a lot of talk about going into a community, working with the community, getting feedback from the community, and leaving the community kind of like a better place than when you started. So as statisticians, we don't really get to do that. And we're kind of doing analyses further away from the communities that we're impacting. So how are we getting feedback and incorporating like cultural values, and like a nutritional science person that tells people to eat healthier diet and leafy greens, but like doesn't take into the context the actual ingredients in these people's kitchens and the cultural relevance of food. So how can we work, or how have you gotten feedback from the community to make sure like interventions are actually effective?
And this is actually something too that I think that Steve, if Steve's still on the call, could answer, because I know that STATCOM has been thinking about doing something along these lines too. So.
Yeah, so I was actually trying to find the link that I'm going to put in the chat right now. I think one of the things that STATCOM has gotten better about is realizing that we need to get better about this kind of thing. And I think our partnerships with the Ginsberg Center and some of these groups on campus that really their sole mission is community partnership and community engagement is so appropriate to what we do. And I think Alicia sort of hit it on the head. It's not just entering and engaging, it's also sort of the exiting piece as well. How do we transition through a project and maintain continuity and really sort of develop the tools to be sustainable in the future? So I just dropped in case folks are interested. I think all of the STATCOM leadership at some point has taken this sort of workshop that's provided through the Ginsberg Center, which sort of talks about sort of how we engage with communities meaningfully, how we speak the language of the people that we're working with, and how we do that respectfully and thoughtfully. So I have no stake in this, but I think it's a great workshop. I think it's great that they offer this periodically. So that's sort of just a shameless plug for the Ginsberg Center if folks are interested.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more quick thing on that? Sorry.
Yeah,
I want to take over, but and so I don't want to speak with Jeff here, since you can always talk to me. But yeah, I think you know, you're part of a team, research team, right? So you should be ready to speak up and contribute your expertise if you're, you know, learning about these areas and think about these things. And then, you know, you have a right to, as much as the, you know, if you're a co-investigator, or biostatistician, you have as much right to talk about this stuff as the PI does. So I think, you know, don't be afraid.
Thank you. So let's try to do some lightning round questions. These are questions from the audience before we get to our last submitted question. So going to present this. Where did it go? Oh no. You guys, can you see things? Let's see. Present. Hopefully I didn't lose the questions. Let's see. Continue recent. Continue. Let's see. Okay, now present. Okay, now you guys can see it. Okay. Dr. Leek, how did you balance this effort, which clearly is important for this society with lots of impact, with regular research efforts? Do you think this should not be considered as a trade-off for junior students and faculty? What are the hardest things when you are making this transition? Thanks.
Great. I'll try to answer briefly, but I'll say that Brummer said it sort of better than I could, which is that you should do your, you know, what you're passionate about. The one beautiful thing about being in academia is, compared to a lot of other jobs, you're kind of your own boss in a lot more ways than you are in lots of other places. And that's one of the best freedoms of this job. And I think you should take advantage of it to the full extent possible. That being said, I do think that I've gotten away with it to some extent because I've had supportive leadership here. And then, you know, I've gotten lucky a couple of times with a couple of projects kind of going well. And so I think there is a little bit of a risk. You know, there's not no risk to doing this sort of thing, but that's something you can talk through with your senior leaders and your sort of more senior faculty. And I think if you're really passionate about something, I can't imagine a better place to sort of support it than the department you all are growing right now. So I'd be very surprised if you got a hard no on a passion project that you really cared about and thought could improve the world. I'd be stunned if that was the answer to your question. So but I think it helped me a lot to tell my chair what I was doing in advance, so that when she started getting weird emails from like people from all over the place, she knew what was coming. So maybe that would help.
This one's also for you. I imagine you might have been developing the idea of statistical education before formally starting your company. What was the turning point that initiated the company rather than continuing to support education as a faculty only?
I mean, it really boiled down to, we did this in the backwards order where we started training people, and then we realized that the HR policies, a lot of the stuff that Luke showed in his paper, we ran up against those in a real practical way, in the sense that people were having trouble getting jobs because of a lot of the things on that in that paper. And so we needed a place to give people their first job. And I sort of had independently been getting a lot of emails because of the Coursera thing about doing data science consulting for different companies and things. And so it was the easiest solution to get people their first job, was for us to create a company. Not that it was easy, it was just the easiest of the options available to us at the time. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd recommend that as a strategy to anybody else, mostly because like you have to learn a whole new thing to run a company, which was a lot of work. So.
Okay, 2 last questions. So promise, thank you so much for dealing with us today and staying along for this conversation. So what suggestions do you have for statistics students and researchers who want to start their own company?
I would get help. I would not in the sense that you wouldn't know how to do it yourself. I think you're all extremely bright and you can learn how to do all the things I learned how to do, but like you probably don't have a lot of experience with managing your own HR infrastructure or budgeting for a small business or doing sales calls or like a million things that you have to do to run a small business or a startup company, or raising capital. Like if you're talking to investors, that's a whole nother thing you have to learn how to do. There are great resources, I'm sure, at University of Michigan. There are here at JHU around teaching you how to do that, but you definitely want to find a partner that is more in the business world. Like that's incredibly important to find. So I would partner up with somebody from the business school who's like an entrepreneurial type. I would do that, and then you be the tech brains and have a person help you learn the business side of it. This would be my strong advice.
Thank you. Last question. What is a skill set that you most value or are working towards now for you to be successful in your mission?
You mean for me to learn? I have so many things to learn. This could be, how long do we have? I have been learning a lot as we go about a variety of things, everything from like the Fair Labor and Standards Act for like how do you create equitable job postings to how do you do sales calls for a business. I feel like the most exciting thing about what I'm working on is that I have to learn so many things that are so far outside of my area, and it's really exciting to like learn new stuff. The things that get me most excited or I value in people that I work with are people who are willing to try to solve big problems and like try hard at things that they might not be able to succeed at right away, and that are willing to take risks are sort of the things I look for in the partners and students and people I work with. And then being friendly and happy and nice to work with is pretty important too.
Thank you. Okay, I think these last two questions are for Bramar, or mostly applicable to Bramar. So are there resources for staff interested in volunteering? I can think of like this new thing that I found was like mcommunity.umich.edu, and that's like a portal where they have opportunities to volunteer, and you can sign up, and you can sign up groups, and there's even virtual opportunities. So that's something I know I've looked into, and it's probably faculty can use it too, but maybe Bramar knows more about this too.
No, I think that this is something that I think I'll be brief because we're at the end of our time. We are actually negative 15 minutes, but I just want to mention that this is one of my goals, that to really come up with a structured frameworks in which we can leverage, and these opportunities are accessible to us for faculty, staff, and students. That's why it's a overall town hall. That we can have that framework and that scaffolding on which to build up our work, because we all need that first spark when we get the taste of it. And so that's why I think I invited Luke, so that we could partner with him because he has a presence in Detroit. He has a very strong knowledge of the footprint of Southeast Michigan. Then how can we, STATCOM and other members can get involved? And it does not always have to be data science. We can partner and volunteer in many, many different domains as well with our humanitarian efforts too. So I think that this is something that if you ask me this question in 6 months and say, Bramar, what did you do? I hope to be able to be answerable to you, accountable to you, and give a better answer.
Thank you. So we're going to skip that one. And this is our last submitted question. So this U.S. has this policy that foreign nationals who have been in China during the past 14 days may not enter the United States, which basically prevents Chinese international students from traveling back home during this winter break, because coming back to campus next semester will be challenging. I know this technically shouldn't be our department's concern, but we have quite a big group of Chinese students here. Is the department planning on doing anything to make it less sad? Bramar?
Yeah, so I think I'll let Mike and Peter respond to this as well, because we have been thinking quite a bit that how to make this winter better, because it is, many people are going home on November 20 when we are becoming fully remote, but many of us cannot go home due to travel restrictions, flights being incredibly expensive. You cannot get back. There are visa situations. We are very cognizant of this very hard summer. So as you know, that this simple thing. So we are arranging, like faculty contributed to raise funds for every student to pick up a Thanksgiving meal. So we know that this is not much, and but still we want to extend our virtual warmth and affection, and also trying to stay engaged. And I know that the DEI committee also have been thinking about this. But we are our collaborative lunches, taking care of each of our groups, making sure that that you are in our thoughts, and having some structured framework for conversations like this, as well as share with the chair conversations with different parts of the community through these collaborative lunches and dinners. So we are trying to, of course, we are connected to our research groups, but then the hallway conversations are not happening where you check in with people. And that's really a very difficult time, but we want to make sure that you are in our thoughts and you have every opportunity to interact with us. Mike, would you like to say something? You were going to the touch-based survey, and like what are some of the other ways you are thinking about staying in touch with students during this difficult time?
Right. So we've just sent out, and some of you responded. We're going to sort of a little reminder, do a little outreach survey to kind of see how people are doing and give people a chance to, try to connect in with specific, avenues for help or for discussion. I think just generally, again, we'll be encouraging faculty to sort of reach out, to maybe spend a little bit of time in class, even just having discussions. We just had a midterm in my class, and I think I'm going to kick off Monday with just like a little, so how are people doing? Let's just have spend a little class time just chatting about your current situation right now, and good things and bad things and stuff like that. So I think we'll be encouraging that. I don't know, I think we may need to do a little bit of thought, and Mara, you and I can have some, and Peter's have the discussion offline about whether we can try to do something a bit more proactive, especially during the long break for people that are stuck here. I mean, obviously, it's going to be the middle of winter, so outside activities may be a little more limited, although perhaps not impossible. And we don't know exactly what the COVID situation is going to be like, but I think we'll definitely be trying to do as much outreach as we can.
But I also wanted to mention that we will host the department holiday party virtually on December 11th. Right. And so Kathy is planning that. So, as statisticians, if there is a hard intractable problem, we try first order approximation, second order approximations, and we never really give up. So COVID has given us sort of like an intractable ill-posed problems. And so we're trying, it's not a very regular function. So we are trying from different avenues, a different optimization. So, and again, please feel free to reach out to any of us. That's something I really want to say. When there is a sad moment, just send an email, and we are here as a community, not just as statisticians. We'll try and make our best effort to support you. So I think, is that the last question, Alicia?
Yes.
So I just want to thank everyone for being in this virtual room. Thanks to Jeff for your remarkable work. Jeff was recently named as one of the public health change makers in UW's 50 change makers. That's a huge honor from a school as distinguished as University of Washington, but all the work that you have done. But I also want to congratulate our own students and thank Alicia and Ben for moderating this, and for STATCOM for leading the way and starting all of these chapters. So maybe we can think about a CBDS and STATCOM collaboration, Jeff. That's the reason that I put all of these three pieces together, that maybe there is just like in Mount Sinai and Columbia, this is starting, maybe there is a CBDS work for STATCOM that we can roll out, and that can be in partnership with the the footprints that the Poverty Solution Center has in the community. So maybe we can get all of these forces together.
Yeah, and I'd love to have at some point you come out, the StatCom folks, to come out and present at Hopkins, because I think it'd be great to have StatCom at JHU too. So it's great. It's always impressive to see that, and thank you so much for the invitation. I hope everybody has a good weekend.
Thank you so much. And I like the high five with your son. So bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.